Hey everyone, me Kevin here with additional information on the next stimulus checks and new updates regarding the entire stimulus package. Yesterday, I broke down discussions between Democrats and Republicans that ended around 1 p.m. Eastern time, and I broke all of the discussions down right after that. Well, this morning, we have follow-up updates to that discussion, and they gave us a little bit more insights on the stimulus checks. Let's get right into this. First, Bloomberg and ABC aired several interviews this morning. First up, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who's also going to tell us about the stimulus checks. Steve Mnuchin was asked, quote, "When can the deal get done?" And he said, "I have no idea." Then he was immediately asked, "What would you tell people who are waiting for the $600 unemployment benefit to resume?" Keep this in mind. This will be entertaining when we see a counter response, so hold on. But he says, quote, "Tell Democrats, let's do a short-term bill." So basically, he's blaming Democrats. He's pointing the finger at Democrats for holding up the $600 benefit. That's because he believes, hey, we put forward the idea to extend unemployment benefits for a week while we negotiate, and Democrats said no. The two issues right now at hand are evictions and enhanced unemployment. And Steve Mnuchin says they're prepared to do a deal on those items. Now, again, keep this in mind because it's going to come up again. He goes on to say, "We're very far apart, but yesterday was very productive, and today is the staff meeting." In the meantime, he says, "We'll meet tomorrow, and if a compromise can be reached, we can have an agreement as early as tomorrow." Tomorrow's Monday. Now, he says this agreement would require a substantial move from Democrats. If Democrats wanted to meet today, he says he'd be there. But today is a day that the staffers are meeting, presumably to hammer out the actual text and iron out some of the details that don't get done in maybe a broader negotiation. Then he was asked about stimulus checks. And this is where I have to quickly mention, yes, the video is sponsored by life insurance that you can get in as little as 5 minutes, and 2 free stocks with Webull when you deposit $100. Okay, what about stimulus checks? He says, the president supports the same amount, presumably the same amount as last time, the $1,200 checks. This is despite the fact that Donald Trump mentioned, maybe somewhere around 3 to 4 weeks ago now, that he supports a larger check. Well, now Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says right now, as it stands, the president supports the same amount. That's $1,200, with minor changes allowing more to get it. And Democrats agreed to the same amount. Those were Mnuchin's quotes. The president supports the same amount with minor changes allowing more to get it. Democrats agreed to the same amount. All right, so this is obviously important. The Treasury Secretary just confirmed the $1,200 number, not more. And by minor changes, we can assume he's talking about what we saw in the HEALS Act, which basically just unlocks the door for all dependents of all ages to get the $500 dependent check, not just those who are under 17, which was passed in the CARES Act. In terms of speed, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says, if we pass a bill this week, quote, I could start printing them the following week. 50 million payments really quickly. That will have an enormous impact on the economy. I want to get that done quickly. Then, after this, and this is good, let's take a quick moment here just to see, okay, that's not bad. If he could print these checks within a week and get the first 50 million payments out like right away, hey, that's awesome. That's great news. That means if they pass something by August 7th, he thinks he could get the first round of checks out by the second week of August, by August 14th. That's really good. That's optimistic. And we've heard Mnuchin say in the past that, hey, we've got the process down so well now, we can print these checks pretty fast. And obviously, they have the direct deposit option as well, which I imagine will go very fast. But after Mnuchin was interviewed, Nancy Pelosi was interviewed. Nancy Pelosi was asked, and remember this. Remember earlier how Treasury Secretary responded by saying, hey, blame the Democrats for the holdup. Well, here was Nancy Pelosi's response. Nancy Pelosi was asked, what do you say to people waiting for an extension? She says, I say, talk to President Trump. This is so classic. It's literally like, Stevie, did Nancy Pelosi trip you again? Nancy, why did you trip Stevie? I didn't trip Stevie. Donnie tripped Stevie. It's kindergarten. Well, they are about to go on recess anyway. Anyway, she says that the Republican proposal of $200, quote, does not meet the needs of the American working families. That's the Republican proposal. Now, this is also very important. Nancy Pelosi indicated that she'd be open to negotiating on the $600 per week amount based on the unemployment rate. This is actually sounding similar to what Chuck Schumer presented in the Senate, when Chuck Schumer said, hey, why don't we just have the $600 boost decline by $100 when we get to different tiers of the unemployment rate? And once we get to like 5.5%, the boost just goes away entirely. Nancy Pelosi appears to be picking that idea up here. The amount of unemployment pay should relate to the amount of unemployment. Nancy's quote, so as that goes down, then you can consider doing less than $600. Her quote again. Nancy Pelosi then went on to say that there's only anecdotal evidence that people are purposefully staying home to collect unemployment and not returning to work because they're making more staying at home. Whereas evidence shows people who aren't working is generally because they can't work because their industries have slowed substantially or shut down. On a side note, the airlines are getting ready to lay off up to 75,000 pilots, mechanics, and flight attendants starting on October 1st as the Treasury Department's layoff ban approaches. Because remember, the Treasury Department bailed out the airlines? They said, okay, we'll only bail you out as long as you don't lay off people, between now and October 1st. October 1st is now around the corner. Nancy Pelosi then cited a Yale University study proving that the $600 boost keeps people out of poverty and that it's not a statistical disincentive to work. Nancy Pelosi is referring to statistics, whereas she argues that Republicans are only referring to anecdotal evidence that there's a disincentive to work, which just means people are saying, well, I'm making war at home. Why would I go back to work? Kind of see a little bit of both. Anyway, we'll keep moving on. I made a whole video on my thoughts on that. I'll link that in the description down below. She then says Democrats are unified on the $600, and in the meantime, Republicans are completely disorganized. Classic sort of slapback. Now, they actually go back to Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who listened to what Nancy Pelosi says, and he's going to respond. And a lot of these things are giving us more insights. Which, by the way, quick note, if you want more insights as well on how you can make your own YouTube videos, remember I've got a pre-sale going on for the amazing YouTube course. It releases on August 10th, and the pricing will be up before that date. So use that coupon code down below and join me in that awesome YouTube course. All right, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said, well, we offered a $600 extension for 1 week, which Democrats refused. He was then asked, quote, why do you wait so long? And Mnuchin says, look, we spent over $3 trillion and we wanted to see how that money was going to work. ABC then played a clip of Trump saying Democrats don't care about the people. And Mnuchin responded by saying, well, Democrats are insisting on over $1 trillion in bailout money for the states. And we're not bailing out the states with financial issues. Generally, he's referring to states, a lot of Democrat states that have these massive pension fund liabilities. For example, the state of California, there's a good chunk of the state of California's budget. I can't remember. I think it's like 15 to 20% of the California state budget that just goes to paying for pension liabilities. That's a lot of the pie. And so here you have Treasury Secretary Mnuchin saying, look, we don't want to come bail out those states. It's not our problem that they have those pension fund liabilities. Obviously, the states counter argue and go, yo, we don't have access to the money printer like you guys do. So when we have to hire more police and ambulances and firefighters or whatever to help with this pandemic or help fund hospitals or whatever it may be, that's coming out of our pocket. Yeah, we've got other expenses, but we didn't plan for a pandemic. But anyway, back to unemployment. Mnuchin says there's no question that in some cases, people are paid more to stay at home, and that creates issues. ABC then brought up Nancy Pelosi's Yale study, to which Mnuchin actually says, well, I went to Yale, and I agree on certain things, but I don't always agree. And then he goes on to say, there's a Chicago study that goes through all of the people who are overpaid. Okay, now we actually have an argument that's tangible, right? Just because he went to Yale and doesn't agree with Yale doesn't mean anything, right? That's just fluff. But when he says there's a Chicago study that goes through all of the people who are overpaid, he's right. There is a Chicago study that reveals that 68% of those receiving the enhanced unemployment benefits are receiving more money than they received from working previously. See, the median replacement rate, they call it, of the enhanced unemployment benefits is about 134%. So people are on average or in the middle making about 134% of what they made when they were working. And Republicans want this to be around 70% of what you were making. And so this is what Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is referring to. The problem is that doesn't address what Nancy Pelosi's argument was. Nancy Pelosi saying that might be true, but the enhanced unemployment benefits per Yale are keeping people out of poverty, and they're getting people through this pandemic when jobs aren't available. Yes, that means some people are going to get paid more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a disincentive, because it's only a disincentive if there are plenty of jobs available, which right now we know that there are not. By some estimates, there are as many as 30 million people unemployed, which leaves as many as 4 to 6 people available for every single job that even has a job opening right now, because there are only around 4.5 to 5 million job openings in the country right now. Crazy time we're in, but there is in my opinion, a pretty detailed update as to what's going on. What I'm gonna do quickly as well, though, is I'm gonna pull up our concept map here, a flow chart. And I just wanna quickly show you where I plotted these updates. And take a look at this. In yellow are the updates for today. So the Democrats here, this is the first time we've heard this come up again, is that Democrats are open to an unemployment extension and willing to reduce that relative to the unemployment rate. That's a good new update that we have here because that's getting closer to compromise. We know that Republicans want $200 per week, but they've mentioned they're negotiable on that $200 number. And they want no state bailout, but they've also mentioned they're negotiable on that number. So right now it seems like Democrats are negotiable on the unemployment extension if it scales with the unemployment rate. And regarding the state bailout, we know Democrats want 900, Republicans want 0, but Republicans have already indicated that they'd be open to adding some money in there. So now it's really just a matter of, well, how much is it gonna be? Is it gonna be a 100 bill? Is it gonna be 200 bill? You know, what's the scale gonna be for unemployment? I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the staffers are working on today in Congress. All right, there you have it. If you like this sort of information, you wanna make YouTube videos like this yourself, make sure to subscribe to the channel and of course, check out that YouTube pre-sale in the links below, right next to the links for life insurance and Webull. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We will see you next time.